Today we're looking at Unit 6, Notes number 6, Victory in Europe. So these notes we will talk about D-Day in greater detail and then how the war wraps up in Europe. Next week we have one more set of notes that we will be doing, 6.7, and then we will be done with our World War II unit. So while fighting in Italy, the Allies began plans to invade Europe. The plan was given the code name Operation Overlord. So in the planning stages, they refer to it as Operation Overlord when they're deciding when the invasion is going to happen, where the invasion is going to happen. U.S. General Dwight D. Eisenhower was given command over the operation. Over 3 million U.S., British, and Canadian troops would assemble in the United Kingdom to prepare for this Western Front invasion. So this leads us to the D-Day attack. So Operation Overlord is the name for the planning stages, the code name for the attack, but once it happens, it's referred to as D-Day. So on June 6, 1944, the Allied forces attacked the beaches of Normandy, France. Paratroopers dropped behind enemy lines to secure key sites. Pre-dawn naval bombardment of German defenses happened along the coast, and there were approximately 3.5 million troops using amphibious crafts to land under heavy fire. So amphibious because they were water, so they traveled across the English Channel, but then they could also get onto land and move. So water and land vehicle. So the Allies had built a phony army as a diversion for Germans at Calais. So Calais is going to be over here. So this wasn't a surprise attack. Hitler had sensed that a attack on the western portion of France would be coming. He didn't know where, so he tried to fortify the borders, the coastline of France more. And so by building a phony army, like tens, he made it seem like the attack would be coming from this point. So Calais was more heavily defended versus over here in Normandy. So that was a little win for the Allies. So it worked, and at first Hitler had refused to send reinforcements to Normandy. So with time, the Allies were able to land their troops and get a stronghold into the beach. And so you'll notice right here at the bottom it says 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there were different landing areas for U.S., British, and Canadian troops of which beaches they were supposed to land at. So here's a breakdown of those landings. So you had Utah Beach, it was a U.S. beach, Omaha Beach, a U.S. beach, Gold and Sword were the British landing sites, and then Juneau, one of the Canadian landing sites. So you can kind of see where they're coming across, where they were supposed to be landing. You can also see the path of the 82nd and the 101st Airborne where they had flown, where they're dropping people behind. The 6th British Airborne where they're dropping men behind beforehand. Here are a few pictures from the invasion. So again, this would be one of those amphibious vehicles. So again, transport them over water, then can go up onto the land. Some more pictures. So it was, even though D-Day is seen as a turning point in terms of us gaining a better foothold onto the beach, it was by no means we just landed on the beach, soldiers just walked on. The U.S., British, Canadian took heavy casualties. It was a lot of fighting. So the cost of D-Day. The Allies suffered an estimated 10,000 casualties at Normandy. By early July, the Allies had landed nearly 1 million troops and 180,000 vehicles. Tanks, jeeps, supplies, forces that would push into France and Germany. So again, this is seen as a huge turning point in the war, where now the Allied forces were getting the upper hand. The momentum is switching in our favor. When we look at the war, in the earlier parts of the war, where Germany is just defeating country after country after country, it was hard for anyone to mount defenses against them, and they had total control. So finally, Germany's hold is beginning to weaken. The U.S. and the Allies are gaining that upper hand. So liberating France. August 25th, 1944, U.S. and French forces liberate Paris and they drive the Nazis into retreat. September 1944, the Western Front has been ripped open and Germany is in retreat heading back to Germany. But again, they haven't surrendered. There's still fighting that is going on, but it's definitely looking now like the war is winnable for the Allies. So a few pictures of this liberation in France. You see the Arc de Triomphe, you see Notre Dame, American soldiers walking through, parades, they're greeted as heroes and liberators. However, it's not over. So we have the Battle of the Bulge. So fall of 1944, the Allies pushed east toward Germany, chasing retreating Nazis. December 16th, 1944, Hitler orders a last-ditch surprise attack. So the Battle of the Bulge would be the final German attack of World War II. It's his last-ditch effort, last chance to try to regain control of the war. So American troops were caught in freezing temperatures, without supplies, and cut off from reinforcements. So you see these pictures here where they're in the snow. They are have their position, they're cold, it's very difficult for them to get warm at any point. So December 26, 1944, American tanks arrive and drive the Germans into final retreat. So those troops got reinforcements, the Allies are able to get resupplied, they have help, and so this Battle of the Bulge, last stand by Germany, is defeated. Finally, let's cover the defeat of Germany. So the Yalta Conference. In February 1945, FDR, Churchill, Stalin meet at Yalta in the Soviet Union to discuss plans for the war's end and the peace to come. So even though Germany hasn't officially surrendered, the Battle of the Bulge is done, they're making their retreat, it's evident now that the Allies will win the war. So this conference, the Yalta Conference, is all about, so now what's going to happen when the war is done? What do we do with Germany? How do we handle that situation? So some of the big achievements at the meeting. First, after the war, Germany would be divided into 4 military zones occupied by the Allies. So there would be a West Zone that would be split into 3 areas controlled by the U.S., United Kingdom, and France, and then the East German Zone controlled by the Soviet Union. It was also decided that the capital city of Berlin would also be split into the same 4 military zones controlled by the U.S., United Kingdom, France, and the Soviet Union. So this whole setup right here, as the war ends, will really lead us into the Cold War. So this whole division of Germany will cause problems and issues between Stalin and the West. Number 2, it was agreed that Stalin would allow free democratic elections in Poland and Eastern Europe. So these were countries that had been taken over by the Nazis, but were liberated by the Soviets. So their governments were a mess. It was agreed that after the war, it would allow the people to vote and decide to reestablish their governments. And then lastly, that the Soviets would declare war on Japan. So another significance about this conference was this would be the last time that all 3 of these leaders would meet. Because not too long after this, FDR dies unexpectedly, so a loss for the ages. So April 12th of 1945, FDR dies unexpectedly in Warm Springs, Georgia. FDR's sudden death was shocking and sank the nation into despair. He was more than a leader. He was seen as a fatherly figure and a friend. For many Americans, he had been president since 1932. So you're talking, 13 years of the same leader, same familiar face that got them through the Great Depression, World War II. So people took it very, very hard. His vice president, Harry S. Truman, would be sworn in and would become the 33rd president of the United States. He would be the one to finish and wrap up World War II. Germany surrenders. By April 1945, German resistance was defeated and the Reich was done. April 20th, 1945, the Soviets shelled Berlin. Hitler and his top officials committed suicide in his bunker. They did not want to face, consequences, punishments for the acts that they committed during the war. They also didn't want anything done to their bodies, so they had people burn their bodies. Hitler's death caused desertions and surrenders among the Nazi forces. May 7th, 1945, Germany surrenders unconditionally to the Allies. May 8th, 1945, VE Day, victory in Europe. This officially ends the war in Europe while the war in the Pacific is still going on. So here are a few pictures of people in the United States celebrating. You can see how excited people are that the war is over, at least in Europe at this point. Germany surrenders, very famous photo of this guy just walks up to the nurse, gives her a kiss. So it's a huge moment. People are excited. But again, we will talk about it next week, how the war in the Pacific ends. So remember to do your key terms. Study for your key term quiz. That's going to be Tuesday the 28th.